Welcome to the Young Indy Chroniclers, a podcast about the making of the show, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which first aired on ABC in 1992.
Kept thinking about what was Indiana Jones like as a young man. I came up with this idea of him seeing the world through the eyes of a soldier and a secret agent.
Over the course of our podcast, we're going to talk to a whole host of very talented people who either worked on this show or were there from the beginning.
We were able to shoot it on location in the real places where these events took place.
Oh, make it up as you go. Oh boy, that's great advice.
We hired some of the best European directors, a whole host of very, very talented people.
I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom.
And I'm Daniel Noah, and this is the Young Indy Chroniclers.
There's only one rule, Indiana. Stay alive.
Welcome back to the Young Indy Chroniclers, the one and only podcast devoted specifically to the Young Indiana Jones television series and franchise. I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom, and with me on this journey of a lifetime is Mr. Daniel Noah.
Hello there.
The beauty of Young Indy is the international scope of the show, not just for the scenery, but also for the POV of the people from these places. This required that the writers become experts of a sort on these cultures, not just an expert on World War I or British or American history, but to be knowledgeable about world history in their ability to speak to and of the culture in which the episode was set. On today's show, we have joining us one of the writers of the series, Jule Selbo. Mrs. Selbo got her start in Hollywood working on the show Tales of the Dark Side, and then went on to a fruitful career working on such shows as Space Above and Beyond, a number of VHS sequels to Disney classics, and the long-running TV show as a producer and writer for the MTV series Undressed. For Young Indy, she wrote the episodes Florence, 1908, the movies Mystery of the Blues, Treasure of the Peacock's Eye, and wrote one of the last produced episodes of the series, Tangiers, 1909. Jule Selbo, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. I was just saying before you pressed record that it's just been a joy because I hadn't seen the episodes for so long. And so you invited me here in Portland, Maine, where I live now. There's just been snowstorms and rainstorms and hurricane winds. And so I just have been sitting on my couch watching Young Indiana Jones and just thrilled again at the production values and the actors and just what we could do. Or George and Rick could do way back then.
Well, I wanted to bring something up since we talked to Matthew Jacobs, and when we talked to him in that episode, we mentioned that he had the second most number of credits after Jonathan Hales in terms of screenwriting. But as I started looking, and that's true, but as I started looking at the list, I realized that you have 2 credits that are double episodes, right? So if we are to count those as hours and not titles, you actually end up tying Matthew.
Oh, well, good. I love it. Yeah, Matthew and I became good friends, and we did a project for Lisa Henson together and a couple of other things. And we don't see each other much because I live on the East Coast and he's on the West Coast. But yeah, that was great. Well, you know, when I started on the second season, I wasn't there from the very beginning.
Oh, interesting.
They needed to replace a writer. And so my agent called and said, they want to talk to you about Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and, you know, George Lucas wants to meet with you. And I said, well, but you'd have to go up to Marin, you know, to do some of the work. And I had just had a baby. And I said, oh, gosh, that'd be great, but I can't leave town. And he goes, why? And I said, because I just had a baby. I'm not going to leave town. And he said, well, don't even get ahead of yourself. You don't even know if he's going to hire you. Don't you want to meet George Lucas? And I went, oh, yeah. So I met him over at Amblin in Steven Spielberg's office. So I was quite impressed. It was really fun.
Very cool.
What was that meeting like? Do you remember what that meeting was like?
Yeah, he had a broken arm because he had fallen and broken his arm. And we just talked and talked. And maybe because I didn't think that there was any way I was going to be able to do this job, I was very calm, and I love history, and George obviously loves history. So we just talked about history, basically, what the series was doing. I just finished a Disney movie, a movie for Disney, not a Disney movie, for Goldie Hawn's company on Agnes, I'm going to blank on her last name. She was the first female newspaper editor in Los Angeles. And so I just finished that, and that was a biopic, historical, all that kind of stuff. So we were just talking about how much fun it is to write historically based things. And then he said, well, I'd like you to join the writing staff. And I said the same thing I'd said to my agent. I said, well, I would really like to, but I can't go up to Marin. And I said, I've just had a baby. And he goes, well, I don't understand. And I said, well, I don't want to be with my child. And he goes, don't you read Good Housekeeping? Which I hadn't, and I didn't. And in a couple other magazines he mentioned, he says, I'm always listed as one of the best employers for young mothers. Oh. And I said, he goes, you're going to have your own apartment up on the ranch. You can bring a nanny. Your husband can bring your daughter up if she stays at home with him for a while. And you'll see her breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you'll be with her at night. I don't know what the problem is. I said, well, I guess there's no problem.
That's fantastic. I love every story we hear. There hasn't been a story about George Lucas I've heard from anyone we've talked to yet that just hasn't made me smile and betrayed just like this warmth of personality and this care for people. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, his kids were so important to him, or are so important to him, and obviously film and story, and those were the three things that you could really connect with him on, and technology.
You mentioned that the show had already started. Had it aired yet? Had you seen anything before you took the job?
No, it hadn't aired. When you guys probably know more than better than I do. It was 1992 it first aired.
First aired March of 92, and it seems like there had already been like 15 episodes or so produced at that point, or in like late stages of production.
Yeah, no, it hadn't aired because I hadn't seen any of them, and just thinking about my daughter's age, they wouldn't have aired yet.
You know, I wonder if, before we get like too deep into the weeds of Young Indy, if we could take a step back for a minute and like a bit about your own history, like how you first got involved with screenwriting, like how you first got into this crazy industry that we're in down here.
I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota, and my next door neighbor, she lived across the street actually, was Kristen Rudrud, who, if you remember in the movie Fargo, Joel and Ethan Coen's movie, she was the wife who has the paper bag on her head and runs around all the time and gets killed. And Kristen and I would put on plays in our garages and charge the kids $10 or 10 cents to come see them. So then I really focused on playwriting, and I had a play done off Broadway in New York when I got out of graduate school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And because my degrees were all in theater. I finally got a PhD in film, but my degrees were all in theater up to that point. And an agent came to see it, and he said, I want to represent you, but you have to promise to do film and TV as well as plays, because I can't make money off of you if you're just a playwright. So like you guys probably, I had that 8th grade teacher who had me making movies, writing them, shooting them, editing them, putting them together and showing them to we had a little film club. And we studied film, and he had a great collection of very, very obscure silent films, but he also had Olive Chaplin and Keaton and Harold Lloyd and all those greats. So we were just this film nerd kind of club in junior high, making films and watching films. So that's how I started. So it was from plays. So then from the play, I started working on Tales from the Dark Side for George Romero.
Man lives in the sunlit world of what he believes to be reality, a dark side.
And that moved into Monsters. My first job, also from that play off Broadway, was I got hired to do a daytime soap. The last year of Search for Tomorrow.
Told you that I had a little talk with Daddy. And he seemed to think that the two of you could get back together. I mean, we know he's thinking about
darling,
it.
I want that very, very badly, but there is no point in your getting your hopes up too high.
Which I don't know if anybody ever remembers, but I really sucked at it. I was terrible because the story goes so slowly in daytime soaps because the average viewer is only watching it 2 or 3 times a week. So you just had to learn to write the same scene over and over and over again. And there was really not much content. There wasn't much anybody discussing anything except for what happened last night or something. I was not very good at it.
Oh, Lloyd, what is it?
Have they delivered this evening's paper yet?
Dad, what happened with Liza?
It's something I really don't care to discuss right now.
Luckily, it went off the air, but we did win a WGA award that year for it. But it wasn't my cup of tea. So anyway, when my agent said I had to do film and television, I ran down Broadway in New York and went to the bookstore and bought Sid Field's book. Sure. And just sat down and wrote a screenplay called Big Sky Romance. And it got optioned a lot, never got made, but it got me a job writing a movie at Paramount, got me a job writing on a sitcom. And so then I moved to LA and just kept working there.
Wow, that's wonderful. And so then, we're up to the Young Indy period. It sounds like a lot of, what got you the job was not just your own experience, but also your love of history. And from what I've heard too, just through listening to other people get jobs with George, it feels like a lot of it's just one's ability to actually converse with him. It seems like a lot of it, he's just looking for a nice conversation with someone. And if you can do that, then you're in his good graces.
Well, he's kind of the antithesis of a daytime soap. He doesn't he doesn't like talking about nothing.
Yes.
It has to have content. It has to have context and kind of deal with the world as it is in present day or in the past and future, obviously. Sure, people have told you we just sat in his office all day and talked story and history, and it was just amazing.
Well, you mentioned it. When you said you were hired on the second season, I wasn't aware of that previously, and it makes a lot of sense though, because I've looked at the credits and most of your scripts are sort of in the back half of the show. And you got some big ones. I mean, and when I look at that on any TV show, I see a writer who gets some really great assignments later in a show's life. I see, okay, this is somebody the producer, the showrunner really has a lot of faith in and really values their voice as part of the show. They're like, okay, this, because they know, early on in a show's life, there can be sort of that finding of the voice of the show and, things can happen. But later on, a producer knows what the show is. So I was kind of curious, it looks like we have Mystery of the Blues, we have Peacock's Eye. Let's talk about those. What were the conversations when it came time, to get those assignments and to work on those stories? Those are both, and the Harrison Ford cameo, maybe that was planned later. Maybe you will know. But they both seem like pretty big assignments. I was just curious what led into those.
Well, George knew what people he wanted to have written about. I'm sure Sidney Bechet was George's idea. I love jazz.
You said you've been practicing.
Oh, I have.
What you been practicing?
Jazz. What was I doing wrong?
You don't know the first thing about jazz. That's what's wrong.
I love jazz.
Well, that's fine. But if you want to play jazz, you got to know where you're coming from.
I love music, and I ended up doing Puccini and the jazz show. But so it just, what we would do is we'd show up in the morning. Well, Deborah Fine, the research person, would give us a bookload of stuff to read at night. And we would show up in the morning in George's office, and we would know, okay, we're going to be talking about Sidney Bechet, or we know we're going to be talking about Chicago in the 1920s, right after World War I. He's at university. So you just kind of research around it, which I think is the most interesting way to approach historical fiction. I've written 3 historical fiction novels now, and I have found that that's the best way to do it, is to research around it, because if you just go straight at the person, you're just limiting yourself. So we would do research around it, and then at the end, after we broke all these stories, 6, 7, 8, 10, each time we were up at the ranch, then we would put down our first choice, and I'm sure I picked Bechet. I know I picked Puccini. And then the second one you picked out of a hat, and that was yours. So I was really happy to get the one that went together with Peacock's Eye, because it was all action, adventure. It was just crazy fun.
We have orders to find a Corporal Rahendra Singh. Why? There's reason to believe he's exchanging munitions information with the Germans.
I very much doubt it.
Orders to bring him in, Captain.
Armistice goes into effect at 1100 hours. The war will be over in an hour.
It wasn't part of the, and I love education, so, but it didn't have a big education component, whereas the Branislaw Malinowski one, part of it did.
I would like to repay you with a kindness. But it's not in my nature.
So yeah, that's how it happened.
That's fascinating. So it was a little random in a way. You think you pulled that one out of a hat?
The second pick was random.
I just have to say though too, I love the Puccini episode. I think it's you just hit a very specific note with it, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. You know, it would be so easy. Like if I were writing it, I would have screwed it up somehow, and it would, you know, Indy's mother would have been just like, oh, she's a horrible person, and that would be the takeaway. But with yours, it was just so beautiful in that, like, you really empathize with her as a character, with her plight, and also with the family. I mean, it's just very heartwarming, even though there's so much drama going on in that process. Yeah. Could you talk a bit about just like the writing process for that?
For the Florence episode?
Yeah, you know, just like navigating that kind of story, which is very complicated.
Yeah, it because it's such a limited amount of time, it had to be one of those love at first sight kind of moments. And Mike Newell, who directed it, when I watched that one yesterday, I was like, oh my God, was I lucky to get Mike Newell on that.
I know, don't you think I see?
But I mustn't.
You have given me your answer. You feel the same.
My head is all turned around. I cannot think. You must leave me alone.
Never. I will not turn away from that which feeds my soul.
Mother.
Yes, Henry?
You said we could have lunch.
Yes, it is time for lunch.
Will you be joining us, Mr. Puccini?
No, Mr. Puccini will not be able to have lunch with us today.
But, you know, when I mean, and that Italian actor is just so gorgeous and so effusive. But when he takes the cloth off of his eyes and he's on her face, and for a man who was as charming and wonderful and lovely as Puccini, for him to have gotten caught up in it from that very moment, I think it was really... it was necessary. Otherwise, we would think he was just being a guy who was just after, you know, some woman who just crossed his path.
Yeah.
And then for her, she had that kind of feeling too, and she was totally charmed. Plus the fact that young Indy's father loves her, and we're very aware that he loves her, but he's very removed. He's very heady. It's all about his work and his books. So she's never had someone chase her in the way that Puccini was.
You must let me escort you to Pisa tomorrow. I grew up near there. I know and I love the country.
That is very kind. I would be unable to accompany you. I have an important meeting to discuss the music festival.
Professor Jones, I'm offering my services to your family. I'm the happy owner of a touring motor car, and I would gladly chauffeur them to Pisa tomorrow. A guided tour.
Generous offer. Very kind.
And also the music. My goodness, the music is just incredible. And sure, you've talked about Rick McCallum, but the way that he produced that episode and a lot of episodes. No one had ever been able to shoot at the top of Tower of Pisa before. And I don't know who Rick talked to or how he talked to him. I mean, you can obviously throw George Lucas's name around, but he got us to the top of the leading tower of Pisa.
Wow.
Some people come to Pisa for the science. I come for the beauty.
And then, you know, because I really loved, and I was worried it was going to be a little bit too, you know, not on the nose, but a little bit too with the physics lessons and attraction. And if the trajectory, if things come close, there's going to be a reaction. But I think the way Mike Newell directed it It was so obvious, but I don't think it was annoyingly obvious.
Did you know that if I hang these two objects side by side, that they'll attract each other and eventually come towards each other?
Are you saying yes?
We're agreeing with you. I think
we are agreeing.
We've talked about this episode a lot for a number of reasons, but it's the biggest picture or the largest picture we get of his mother in the series. It's sort of the episode that most focuses on her and gives us an insight into her. And as Peter was sort of getting at, what a complicated way to do it, coming from, George Lucas is the producer of this show. His marriages are things of public record. There's some sensitivities that I'm sure resonated with him from the story as well. And I saw it when I was maybe 21. I was young, but I was an adult. And I remember, my reaction to it then was a lot more of how can she do this? Mm-hmm. Now watching it, I perceive more nuance to the story.
Yes.
And that's true of a lot of these episodes. In fact, your episodes particularly, Jule, I will say that I'm able to do that, and I appreciate them so much more now, sometime later.
An undisclosed amount of time later.
Your first reaction was maybe closer to Young Indy's reaction when he realizes something's going on, but he has no idea what. But he can just sense that his mom's upset, Puccini's around a lot, Puccini's making her upset, and he gets so protective. I thought that was really a nice thing to show for a young kid.
I'm glad Father's coming back tonight.
Well, yes. Yes, it'll be good to see you.
Mother's acting kind of strange. She doesn't act strange when Father's around.
There's the telescope. Galileo constructed the first complete astronomical telescope.
I wish he had written Mother a letter.
Are you speaking of your father?
Mother would have liked that.
Henry, would you please concentrate on the matter at hand and tell me what you see through the telescope?
It was nice, and it was a nice to show a different side of that character as well. I mean, we've talked about this a bit in the past, but the nature of the Corey Carrier episodes oftentimes do fall into the category of Indy runs away. Indy finds some historical figure at a very young age and goes on a little mini adventure with him. So to see him in this role of both protector, but also protector by kind of ignorance in a way. He kind of knows what's going on, but he's a kid. He's not as worldly about such things. So he's in a way he's representing for the mom kind of this blank stare, this sort of blank, this mirror reflection back to herself in a way of just what am I doing with this?
What did you buy when you went shopping?
Shopping?
Yeah. Didn't you go shopping today?
Yes, I bought a scarf.
I looked through Galileo's telescope today.
That's nice.
Did you see Mr. Puccini today?
Yes, I ran into him while I was shopping.
And I think it's just such a brilliant episode. It resonates so much with me.
That scene with Miss Seymour and the mom, where you just realize this has been a week, and it's so intense that everyone's head is spinning.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of fun about it.
You must allow yourself time to think. But I can't think. I feel as if something has a hold of me, if it's leading me. Is it my heart? Should I follow my heart? I always thought that I was happy, content. I love my husband, but I am electrified when I am with him.
But it's believable. Yeah. It's presented in a way that you believe it could happen, and I think those things happen in people's lives. Whirlwind things that destroy their lives or upend their lives, but they feel passionate about them, and it captures that so beautifully.
And I think what's so great about it too is there's a version of the story where it actually doesn't destroy her life. It actually kind of makes her life better, and that is kind of the tragedy of it at the end, where she chooses to remain with her family with a husband who's maybe not supporting her enough emotionally, and all these things. And there's that sort of tinge of tragedy there, where it's oh, maybe Maybe you should have gone with him.
Yeah. But, it's so funny. I was watching it, and now I'm just blanking on the actor's name, and I just loved him so much, the Italian actor.
Oh.
We just faxed those days. They would send notes from the set, and then Rick would say, just fax back what any changes there needs to be. And so for some reason, when they're underneath the Leaning Tower of Pisa and it's raining, and I think because they had to change the location because it was raining, so that he said, we just need to make that conversation between the mom and Puccini something else. So I can't remember if it was too long or too short, but anyway, so I wrote this new stuff for Puccini to say and explaining himself and stuff. And there was a parenthetical, great pain. And it was a parenthetical. And then I watched it when at first they showed us the dailies, and he said it as a piece of dialogue. And I just put my head in my hands. I was like, oh no. But then I actually thought, he sold it.
My son had Indiana spark as a boy. Now he's grown up and he uses his energy to try to keep peace between my wife and myself. I cannot create where there is conflict. I cannot hear music anymore. Hear nothing. Great pain. Forgive me.
It's all right.
He just did it so well.
I remember that line.
That was supposed to be a parenthetical.
It's a great line. That's great. It's great. He does play it well.
Oh boy, it's the writer's nightmare right there.
Yes.
If I would love to ask a little more about Mystery of the Blues as well, because I think it was pretty common at the time to have shows begin with a 2-part pilot, like a movie-length pilot to begin stuff. But Young Indy is unique in that, it kind of sprinkles in these movie-length episodes or scattered around. Was that the intention from the start to make this, or was it more? Did you break it more as a part 1, part 2?
No, we broke them separately.
Okay.
But knowing, I guess, that he wanted to do an Elliot Ness episode, he wanted to do a Bechet episode. Elliot Ness and Young Indy are at university at the same time, so why not make them roommates? I mean, that's the way that the writers we connected it. And, could have been George's idea from the very beginning, or it could have come out in the room. So, no, we didn't really. But then, because it was about the music, it was about the quartet, harmony, university kind of white guy music, and then the jazz club, and then the real jazz clubs. It was just really great that we could use that music all the way through, and because if you remember in the Elliot Ness episode, Sidney Bechet is in the background basically. Indy just goes to the club. I loved it, and it's so great to see Jeffrey Wright now in American Fiction. And I was going to look up last night, and I forgot to if Young Indy was one of his first performances. Because he was so good in it. And I remember thinking, I had never seen him before he got this job. And I thought, this guy's just going to become a star. He's so good.
So this is one of your first roles in the beloved Indiana Jones TV adaptation. Did you watch the films growing up?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I loved Indiana Jones and, Harrison Ford. Of course, actually, Harrison Ford kind of bookends this movie. These were 2 episodes that were compressed together to make a TV movie, and Harrison does the intro. He's kind of telling the story of his youth, and we cut back to Chicago, 1917, I believe, and Sidney Bechet, who I play. I've just immersed myself in his music when I was studying this thing. That was the best. Maybe it was a great experience doing that. But one of the best aspects was learning his music.
It was not his first role, but it was one of his early ones. But his very first role was in a Harrison Ford movie, Presumed Innocent, in 1990. But this would have been his 4th job. very early on in his career.
He was amazing. And the fact that I could dig further into his life, and then there's a little bit of Bix Beiderbecke in the second part. And he died very, very young, but it was an amazing cornetist. And just to be able to bring their music to life, because, Louis Armstrong, people will always, tend to know of Louis Armstrong, and the fact that he had a little part in this was kind of fun. But I think bringing Sidney Bechet to more people's attention was really great. And he's Creole. Then you have the black world in Chicago, and then the white world, and it's just after the war when things are in such flux. The thing about the young kid dying in the lake, I don't know if you remember that, when they talk that dinner table conversation when they're talking about Booker T. Washington and stuff. I remember researching that, and it was a true story, and it just broke my heart.
Wow.
Because there was the black beach and then the white beach. The young boy was having trouble.
My father wanted me to accept the white folk murdering a little colored boy. I couldn't. I was taught to fight. And I'm gonna fight for what's right. The only way that they'll take notice is if you go out and beat the hell out of
Don't you go bragging about being in that riot.
That boy was not following the rules.
Daddy, the boy was swimming. He got a cramp. He made the mistake of reaching out to a white folks' raft, and they threw stones at him. What kind of rules you want us to follow that says a boy can't try and save himself?
It's not up to us to change the rules.
Well, they ain't gonna give us nothing. We gotta demand change.
Riots and violence are not the answer to nothing.
So it was really sad. It was a sad story, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting how, like, Indy, especially in the, later episodes, does tackle these issues of racism at the time. And it's something that, like, I just have to applaud it so much, because it's like I don't think a lot of shows today would even want to tackle such a subject, and done so in such a profound way. Can you talk a bit about, like, was there ever conversations in the room of, like, the best approach for these sort of topics, or did you purely let the history dictate how you'd address it?
Yeah, I think it was just let's let the history dictate it. And even in the episodes that I didn't write, where young Indies in Africa, in India, in China. What's so great about the series, I think, is the young Indy doesn't care. He's just looking for someone to have fun with. He's tired of hanging out with the adults. He just wants to go and find a young person. And so I think that's just a nice thing about the show.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask now about Tangiers 1909 and then Morocco 1917. Best as we can tell, and the records are very spotty on the later episodes, these were both produced, or they were produced after the show was finished airing and were completed essentially for the home video release. And they're both written by, they're the only two episodes that are like that. I was curious when you wrote, or were you brought on late to write new episodes for the show?
No, I was not brought on late to write new episodes. And I was always under the impression that they were going to be shot no matter what. And because George did have this overarching idea for the series, but I kind of think, and I could be wrong, I kind of think Tangiers was shot, but then just kind of sat for a while because he didn't know what to pair it with, or I'm not sure, but I could be wrong on that. Because I do remember seeing some footage on it while we were still up at the ranch. Because we, every once in a while we'd go into the screen room and watch dailies, or go into the editing room and see him put some of his ILM magic together and stuff like that.
I've arranged something tomorrow which may interest you. Tea with the Sharifa of Jebel.
The Sharifa of Jebel, wasn't she?
Emily King, quite right, Miss Singh.
Emily King is, or I should say was, an English woman.
She came over here some years ago.
And married a native.
Well, it's a bit more than a native. The Sharif was descended from Muhammad.
That's interesting.
Well, as best we can tell, and we might learn more about this as we go, but it seems like, so the Tangiers episode is the last one shot with Corey Carrier, and you can kind of feel it because he ages very quickly. In the current pairing, it starts with his very first episode in Egypt, and he's like very young and precocious, and then like they go on a short trip, and then he's like
he's 13,
4 years older. Yes, exactly.
Jeepers creepers. Thanks. Mr. Harris says the head of a gram these years on a stick in the marketplace. Let's go see it.
Very tall. Voice goes down an octave or so, and it's so it feels like that's probably the later one shot. As far as we know, it seems like that was shot in 1996, but we could also be wrong. I mean,
and also, Morocco clearly uses the same locations, and that's where I see Rick as a producer being like, "I got 2 scripts. I'm going to shoot them in the same places to save money." I almost wonder if the intention was to make them another TV movie like Travels with My Father and Peacock's Eye, and pair them perhaps as the location, like Morocco Adventures. And then maybe they didn't feel like that worked. Maybe they looked at that and were like, this pairing doesn't work, so what do we do? That's quite possible.
Yeah.
But so you would have written maybe when you were working on essentially the 3rd season of the show.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
It does feel like, the writer's room kind of took them in chunks. You say you came on in the 2nd season, but it feels more just like you guys are breaking a bunch of episodes at one time, and it kind of overlaps, and it would have, like a lot of the shows would have gone for season 3, et cetera. Do you kind of remember like a ballpark of just like, how many kind of episodes you guys broke for that session?
Well, there was Matthew, me, Hales, Darabont, Hensley, and Gavin. And so that would be 12. We would break 12 because we each walked away from Marin, having been up there for, 7-10 days with George, with 2 scripts to write.
Interesting. Okay. And so, but was Treasure of the Peacock's Eye, was that part of that grouping, or was that another story, another break session?
I just don't remember. I remember choosing Branislaw Malinowski because I loved, I thought I would always, when I grew up, I thought I'd be an anthropologist.
Sure.
But so I was very interested in writing about him and finding out about him. And then I think that the action adventure, first part of that, was something that I chose out of the hat.
Remember this? It's a map we found on the capital scene.
You kept it? Why?
I talked to a Greek scholar at the museum. He translated for me. This says, "Behold the eye of the peacock, for you are the chosen one."
I mean, it sounds like a dime novel.
Indy, it's a treasure map.
Well, you know what I love about that episode that I maybe only realized in the last couple of years, because that's one where when I was younger, I didn't understand why it ended with Branislaw Malinowski. Like, I watched it and I'm like, fun, great, Young Indiana Jones. I'm like, I don't know that I get the ending. And older, I realized,
you must put this death out of your mind.
Is it just some kind of ritual? What's the point?
Do not make yourself crazy.
You are mocking our militant society. In other words, we are starting in World War I, this brutal, horrible thing, and then we go to the South Pacific. And the characters who we have just spent all these hours watching in this brutal war think that these people are uncivilized. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, no, the Westerners are the uncivilized one. They've just killed millions of people. These people are devastated over the death of one person. And this is touched on in another episode in Africa, that they have a conversation, I think, that touches this topic. But you dramatized it. You showed it. You showed that process and the war on this island, and how one kid dies and the war is over and we have to make peace because this is too awful. And yet, so I think it's brilliant.
They brought you to impress the Kirwinians in friendship.
Well, that's what I don't understand. They just got finished killing each other.
They don't fight because they're enemies. They fight because the ghosts want them to. The ghosts require the battle.
Ghosts?
A ghost wants the battle, oh yes. If he doesn't get it, he'll bring sickness, blights to crops, droughts, floods.
Well, then it's all just a vicious circle. And the battles never stop.
Take your clue from the people, young man. They bear no ill will to each other.
Listen, sir. All we want is to get back to civilization.
This is civilization.
A civilized civilization.
Yeah, well, he was sacrificed. Somebody had to die. The first one down was the sacrifice to keep everybody else safe. So there was honor in his death, but at the same time, we look at it as horrific and sad, and it is at the same time, but it's just their way of keeping balance in their culture. They talk a lot, or we talk a lot in the series about balance.
Yeah.
So it's just different how they did it. I mean, right before they hit the Trobriand Islands and Malinowski, they go to that island. They land on that island where we don't know if they're cannibals or not, but they're out to get them, right? And so that was just a whole different, I think it's just looking at all the different cultures in the world and how everyone goes through life a little bit differently, but we're all searching for some kind of balance.
Do you have a hammer, a scissor, or some tools here with you?
Why?
We need to open this box that had a difficult lock.
There may be something in my quarters. Interesting, isn't it, that the nature of the society determines the nature of their tools. Here there are no locks. A gardener needs a stick to till a garden, a bone to dig, a vine to secure posts, but you need a more sophisticated kind of tool to open a locked box filled to thwart a sophisticated kind of greed.
Yeah, it's so interesting watching it again, the series again now for this podcast, just realizing that in many ways, Young Indy hits that theme of balance, even more so than the prequel films, which has been talked about a lot recently, that George is always, balance of the force and et cetera, et cetera. But it feels like in many ways, Young Indy is hitting that on a much more deep, emotional, philosophical level with Young Indy.
This is the stillness of the eternal beginning. The world as it has always been.
Love stems from a desire for balance.
You see, people want things they cannot have. And that makes them sad, and they suffer.
A man can marry and have a career, but a woman can't. At least not until she's established.
The public was shaken when the anime captured it. When the public is shaken, the politicians have a problem. When the politicians have a problem, I have a problem.
Our dancing may seem more formal, but it can be equally erotic. Don't you agree, Captain Duval?
I guess it depends who you're dancing with.
Britain and France, with timely American assistance, smashed Germany and restored the balance of imperial power.
Yeah. I mean, what a gift that is to be able to do 70 hours or whatever, however many it ended up being, of just exploring all these different people's, very smart people, very different people's reaction to how life should be lived, or the best way to live life. And then Young Indy responding to it. I mean, it's just amazing. I watched Sean Patrick Flannery in this, and I go, it's just, he's the young Indy, but he's the older one who's still up for adventure, but just accepts everyone.
Yeah.
Why are you so kind to me?
You have beautiful eyes.
I'm not sure they are right now. I should go and freshen up. You really shouldn't be seen with me, if you want to protect your reputation.
Don't worry about me.
There's such a lack of cynicism to his performance and to his character. Like, he sees such horrors in World War I, and yet you do believe that after the war, he's still kind of almost untarnished. Like, he's obviously been damaged to a lot, but he's the sort of guy that, like, he's still up for adventure. He's still up for acceptance.
Yeah, he still has some of his innocence with him.
Still some of his innocence, yeah.
Even though he's been through hell, which we watch on the show.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is a legend or not about Sean, and maybe someone has told you, but apparently he just had almost a photographic memory as when it comes to dialogue.
Oh, wow.
And including foreign languages. Because he's just like,
That's great.
So someone told me that once, and I don't know if it's true or not, but maybe you'll find out along the way.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
All I want is a new phone. I went to the Ministry of Phones, and my form blew out the window. And then I went out on the ledge, and a pigeon knocked it into the street. And then a man stepped on it. And then I had to chase after a tram. And then a woman hit me with her handbag. And so I went to the police. They made me fill it out in German. And then they gave me the 3rd degree. And then they put me in jail.
What you're trying to say is you're upset.
No, I'm not upset. I'm incandescent with rage!
Well, he has so much of the dialogue in the show, and he's the only real recurring character. So he's got to nail this exposition and all this stuff. I mean, he's doing a lot of work.
And the action stuff that he did, it's understandable now why he's into jujitsu and stuff like that.
Yeah, you never see this stuff on TV now. Like watching some of the action, even some of your episodes where there's horseback riding and stunts. Like, I can't think of a show that's on TV today that has stunts like that. I can't think of one.
Yeah, you have to have like the most amazing crew, the most amazing producer, the most amazing camera person, which we did. So that was great.
We've got it!
Let's open the box.
I think that's what the key is for.
And that's what I have. Thank you very much. I will take that off your hands. You two do not kill easily.
No, we do not!
It is one of the interesting things with the show, though, is because of the re-edits and the various incarnations of the show, the credits get a little muddied at a certain point. And that actually leads me to my next question, though, is like, as production on the show was going on, you know, you've talked about being there for the writer's room and then you're off writing your scripts and such, but as the production is going on and up to and including the re-edits done throughout the 1990s, were you ever called back in to work on the interstitials, to kind of fuse the 2 episodes together into a movie, or to like add additional elements to episodes you've already written? Or was it very much, you know, something that George or Jonathan Hales himself would be working on?
Yeah, I think George, maybe Hales had a hand in them. But no, we weren't asked to come back. It's interesting. It's one of the best jobs. I swear if it was still going on and George still wanted me on the show, I'd still be doing them because it was just the most fun writing. But I know that Hales and George, they knew each other from the very, very first season, and George trusted Jonathan a lot. And so Jonathan just kind of, and he loved going back to the ranch. Sure. He would just come back over to England and just like visit on the ranch for a while. So I think that Hales was around and obviously very facile. So,
what year, you said it was 92 when you had your interview. What was the last year you worked on the show?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I thought that I was up there for three years, probably, back and forth, because we would go break stories, pick stories, go home and write, send in our scripts. Then we would all come back and basically I don't remember us getting notes from each other, but we were all kind of together, and George would give us notes on our script while we were all there. And so there could be a discussion going on, but basically we're there to get George's notes and then to all be together again. And then maybe we would break a couple more stories and then go back. Oh, maybe we did that. Maybe maybe when we came back for notes, maybe we went away with another story. Not sure.
That would make a lot of sense, because so we're talking like 92 through 94, 95, something like that, which would put us into the post ABC years and into kind of the movie of the week years as well, which would kind of fit with your work on Peacock's Eye, but also the Tangiers episode, potentially even confirming, Daniel's own theory about it, where maybe it was meant to be one of the TV movies and ultimately worked in a different way.
That would also help with Carrier's age, because he is a few years older, but he can't be like 5 years older, right? So, it would have to be shot fairly close in that time.
One question, we've heard rumors, there's lots of, this is one of the shows that has kind of the infamous episodes that were never produced, the episodes that are rumored to have been either outlined or full scripts written for them. 2 questions. One is, do you recall any scripts that you wrote that never got produced? And then second, There is rumors of a episode that would have been a follow-up to Treasure of the Peacock's Eye, like a single episode that would have dealt with kind of Indy and Remy on their boat ride back to London, still kind of arguing about whether or not to go after this diamond. Do you have any recollection of that?
No. I remember talking about a shot where they would be on separate boats going in different directions. That was kind of like I was watching him and I was like going, gosh, I remember talking about that, but I guess we didn't do that. And no, I think we everyone went back to their lives and when we're on to their next projects. But George kept in touch with us all. I mean, we were, always invited to the July 4th picnic. And we got to go to his one of his big birthday parties, and he put us all at a table together. I mean, because I think he loved it because he's such a storyteller. He loves to talk story. So to give himself the permission to just sit with us for 2 weeks and break story after story after story was just so much fun. And so we all got to go to this big birthday party and sit. The next table next to us was Francis Ford and Scorsese and De Palma and all those, the biggies and Robin Williams and stuff. So we had he treated us very nicely.
That's wonderful.
Are you talking to the directors too?
We're hoping to. We're in touch with a couple of them. Some are harder to get in touch with than others. I mean, that was one of the, actually that does lead to a question though, because like, as you said, Mike Newell, but also, like the directors are just so high class throughout the whole series. Like,
amazing. Yeah.
Was there any interaction with you and the directors for the show, or was it very much like script and you see the dailies coming in as they do? Like, what was that kind of interaction like?
Well, it was. As writers yourself, you'll understand, when the producer, George Lucas, hires top quality directors and then basically says, shoot the script.
Beautiful phrase, beautiful words.
You're just going, oh my God, when is this ever going to happen to me again? So for the most part, they shot the scripts. And if there was going to be any changes, Rick McCallum was really great about having them, tell us what they needed. So sometimes it was mostly probably through Rick. I think I talked to Carl Schultz one time. He was so great. He did The Peacock's Eye and my other Mystery of the Blues. I just loved him. And one time he sent me I guess we must have been talking on the phone because he said, Jule, I'm going to give you a break. He said, you're just working so hard on these action scenes, and you're telling me when the table's going to tip over and when someone's going to smash their face. And he said, and I want to do what, I want to accomplish what you've got. He said, but you don't know the locations. The locations have changed. And he said, just, a couple of things, just focus on a couple of things that are really important to you in the fight sequence. And then I've got my fight manager and, we'll bring it to life. But it saved me so much time. Because I was like, because I when I was in college, I took a lot of stage combat. And then I ended up teaching stage combat at a couple universities. Weird part of my life. And so I was really into the fights. And he said, just you back off, trust me. So that was always great.
That's awesome.
And then the thing with Mike Newell when he said he needed that new scene for the Puccini. But mostly it was like through Rick, like this isn't working, we have to change this location, what can you fax us, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, even in my own limited writing experience, it's like you don't get that. Like it's they're just if they completely rewrite it, or if the actor's like, I just don't want to say this line, then it's just you never get notified. You see it for the first time on TV, and you're like, oh my God, what's happening?
I know. And then you've got your guys, your fabulous Italian actor going, great pain.
Well, that won't work, so it's okay.
Great pain.
But yeah, but I do think that I don't remember writing Jeepers and that kind of stuff. And we always would kid George a little bit because he loved his handles. So I would assume that he probably put in some of those jeepers, or maybe he asked me to do it and I just did it because he wanted me to. Right. Because I was listening to Corey say it and I was like going, jeepers, my goodness, writing that.
Jeepers. His head is on a stick?
Yes, you see, whenever anyone displeases the Sultan, he cuts their head off, salts it, and then the head is displayed to remind everyone else not to displease the Sultan.
You said you've been watching it. You've been watching them.
Yeah.
What strikes you now? You're watching your episodes or whatever episodes you've been watching.
Well, as you know, when you're very close to something and then you actually see it on screen, you're just crawling out of your skin. You just go, "Oh no, that's not what I had in mind," or this, And even as wonderfully done as these episodes are, I remember the first time I watched them going, "Ooh, oh no, that didn't work. Oh, that I wanted it to be," And so this time, watching them so fresh, I was just like, "Oh my God, this." I think I got through about 20 of them.
Wow.
In the last couple of days. And so now I have to go back because I really wanted to rewatch Jeroboam's Albert Schweitzer one, and I didn't get to that. And and the Hawkeye, I didn't get, Hawkman, I didn't get back to that one. So I'm going to keep watching them. But yeah, so I think what really gets to me now is how different it is from present day television. How different it is from what's chosen to be produced. And I think even for the time, it was different enough. And for some reason, well, I know what the reasons are. I mean, ABC was frustrated because they thought, okay, this is Indiana Jones. We're going to get an action adventure every week. Well, sometimes it was a war story. Sometimes it was a musical. Sometimes it was a love story. Sometimes the coming of age part was so in your face that it became a coming of age story more than an action adventure story. Right. So they weren't getting what they thought that they could advertise to an audience. Every week you're going to get this, which is what network stuff is now. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff on Netflix and Prime and Hulu and stuff. Because people do tune in because if they want a comedy, they tune into a comedy. When they tune into a drama, we want to react and to have an experience. And if you couldn't predict it with Young Indy, I think ABC had a little bit of trouble with that. So obviously it doesn't matter to me because I like things to be eclectic. I'm just more into character. I want to see a character grow. So what I see now is like just the commitment. And then I'm absolutely jealous that we didn't get to be on set and travel the world.
Right, of course.
I just was like, oh my God. That's the first thing that everyone asks me when they hear that I worked on Young Indy. Oh, did you get to go there? Did you get to go to China? Did you get to go to Turkey? And I go, no, we didn't get to go. We could only do it in our mind.
Yeah. It is wild. Part of the reason Daniel and I are doing this podcast is like looking back on it. It is such an anomaly of television from the era, and even today. I think you're spot on when you say that even like streaming shows, it's like they want what the show is promised to be. Where it's like Young Indy, every episode it's something else, and I've said it before, and I stand by it. I think in many ways it's the most anthology kind of show I've ever seen. Like there's other anthology shows out there, but the Twilight Zone, it's going to be spooky. Maybe you'll have like one that's a little funnier, but like it's still that kind of show. Young Indy though, it covers the gambit of what a show can be, and that's wonderful. But ABC, as you said, doesn't, network executives don't like that.
Yeah.
It defies the distribution model.
Yeah, we would be in George's office breaking stories, and he'd get a call from ABC or he'd get a call from Paramount, and they'd say, well, we need this, we need that, and he'd go, yeah. Then he'd hang up and we'd go, so what are we supposed to do now? And he goes, don't worry about it.
I love that.
George's whole career, he's just absolutely had a vision for what he wanted to do, and he did it. And I don't think of anything where he's ever written for anyone else.
I do love the anti-authoritarian streak in George. I love it so much, and it comes across in Young Indy too. I think there's a nice little like anti-authority figure. The show itself there's always the end goal of the movies, right? Like at some point, the idea is like Indy is going to become this sort of person from Raiders that we meet for the first time. Was there ever like a talk of like, or a map? I doubt there was actually a map, but like, was there ever talk about like, how are we creating this mathematical equation that ends up with a Harrison Ford?
Well, we all knew, what the Harrison Ford character is with the hat and the adventure. And to portray someone who is just adventurous, it's when I think of the characters that I write today and have written on other projects, it's like you just have to kind of find that primary thing that drives them. And for a lot of people, it's love or respect or something like that. And for a character like Indiana Jones, it's adventure.
What is Sankawa?
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
You did it, didn't you?
They want you to go for it.
Oh, Marcus!
They want you to get a hold of the Ark before the Nazis do, and they're prepared to pay handsomely for it.
And the museum? The museum gets the Ark when we're finished.
Oh, yes.
That thing represents everything we got into archaeology for in the first place.
Dad wasn't looking for a book about the knight's tomb. He was looking for the tomb itself. Don't you get it? The tomb is somewhere in the library. You said yourself it used to be a church.
Talking about the Nazca lines.
What are those?
Hold on here. Geoglyphs. Giant, ancient drawings. Carved into the desert floor in Peru. From the ground, they don't look like anything. But from the sky, only the gods can read them, because only gods live up there.
It's like he's not like crazy going out and looking for crazy adventures, but if they present themselves, and he also puts himself in a position to have them present themselves, it's like that's his adrenaline. That's why he's alive. That's why he's going. And I think that just goes all the way through with Corey's character and with Sean Patrick Flannery's character that, hey, you want to go do this? Oh, okay, let's go and see what happens.
There's something written, scratched into the parchment. You can see it when it's wet. It's written in English. It says, above the tomb of Lycomedes, the horses will show you the way to Alexander's greatest triumph.
Tomb of Lycomedes?
Yeah, there's a tombstone of Lycomedes in a museum reconstructed in Alexandria. I was there when I was a kid.
You guys asked about something at the very beginning. I did the Sidney Bechet episode, and then I think what happened when they kind of were cutting out a lot of the George Hall stuff, and then George just, he used his friendship and he said, you got to do this for me, please. and Harrison said, okay, if we could shoot it in Wyoming, if we can shoot it on my ranch, and you get, probably one day, they shot it in one day. So that was exciting to see Harrison Ford in my episode.
Did you write those scenes, or was that after you'd finished your draft?
I think I may have written it. Or did George write it? I'm not sure.
Well, we know...
I was going to look up and see if I could find any of the old scripts, but I cleaned out my storage space in L.A. when I moved to Portland, and I just had so many scripts, and they were all so heavy, I tossed a lot.
Oh, no.
There's a treasure. There's a garbage bag filled with treasure somewhere. Somewhere in a landfill are the answers we seek.
I gave my daughter's boyfriend my Young Indiana Jones jacket, and I was thinking about it this morning. To like write him a note saying, "Okay, if you guys ever break up, I get it back."
It's those mementos. We never think about them at the time, but I'm just like, my heart's breaking right now. I'm just like, those scripts, the sacred text.
Is that the daughter you had just had when you got the job?
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That is wonderful.
Right,
that's very cool. That's very cool.
George gave us wonderful Christmas presents.
Well, what was your favorite? We have to ask that now.
Well, Well, the Indiana Jones jacket was great. You know, we got a robe one time. One time we got a really beautiful wooden box with a lot of Lucasfilm kind of memorabilia in it.
Oh, wow.
Just really nice things.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it sounds like such a wonderful time, even just to be working and to have that opportunity. And, you know, the kinds of people like Lucas who were successful at that time just seemed like they really cared and they brought something to this business.
And this for Frank Darabont was pre-Shawshank.
Yeah.
And so he had written, when I met him, so he probably the first year people knew the whole story, but when I met him, he had gotten permission to write Shawshank. He had written the script. He had sent it to Stephen King and had not heard.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the evidence. This was revenge. He fired the gun empty and then stopped to reload.
You strike me as a remorseless man, Mr. Dufresne. I hereby order you to serve 2 life sentences back to back.
I send you here for life. That's exactly what they take.
I'm Mr. Norton, the warden. I believe in 2 things: discipline and the Bible. Here you'll receive both.
Why'd you do it?
I didn't, since you asked.
You gonna fit right in. Everybody in here is innocent. Hayward, what you in here for?
Didn't do it.
He would just sit in the corner. He would bring a box of cereal to our meetings every morning and a carton of milk. And he would just sit there like this, you know. And you could tell he was just. And so finally someone said, just call Stephen King. Just call him. So one day he did call him, and Stephen went, oh, yeah, I read it. I liked it. Yeah, you can go sell it. And Frank was a much happier guy.
I feel like I'd like Darabont a lot. I love my cereal. I'd eat it all day long if I could.
What a great group of writers, though. I mean, that room, Darabont, you, Hensley, who wrote Die Hard with a Vengeance, which is the best Die Hard sequel. I won't take broach from anyone on that.
No, that's right.
You know, Matthew, of course, Gavin, we've spoken to as well. Like, and there's even some footage as a documentary we found. We're trying to get a higher quality version of it that was on a Japanese Laserdisc. But it was a group of writers, and they're sort of just talking in the room and clearly having a good time. And it was just like, what a wonderful and creative environment to go and talk about these things and break these stories. And
we're called in from all parts of the world to meet with George, who has a master list of events and story ideas. It can get loud. It can get excited, you know, because you've got writers in there. It can get kind of passionate, of course, but it's all to the good. It's all, you know, aimed at creating the best show that we can.
Yeah. And you know, Rosemary Ann Sisson was just fantastic, too. And we became very good friends. I visited her in London quite a bit after the series. A writer to the core. That was all she did. She wrote books, she wrote TV, she wrote plays, and she would invite me to the Players Club in London, and I would, you know, sit there with Julian Fellows and other playwrights, and she just lived to create characters. Yeah. But one thing about Mystery of the Blues is Joel McNeely did the music. Yeah. And I had heard Alberta Hunter when I first moved to New York after graduate school. And for some reason, I went down to the village, East Village, and Alberta Hunter was singing at a club. And she was probably in her 80s then, just this little tiny, tiny woman with her hair was pulled back in a bun, just a big smiley mouth. And she sang that song, A Handyman, which is so risque.
Now, whoever said a good man was hard to find? Positively, absolutely sure was blind. Sometimes he's up way before dawn, busy cleaning the rough edges off my lawn. My man is such a handyman.
We did kind of the just the verses that were a little bit non-risque, and I asked Joel McNeely, I said, can you find that? I don't know where to find it. I can't find it. I researched as much as I could. And he said, I'm looking. Because I really wanted that song in there. And so finally I thought he wasn't going to find it. And he goes, I am not stopping until I find it. And so he found it. And I just love that. And the woman who sang it, that beautiful black woman who sang it, they found her in a church.
Wow.
And she's never really done anything before or since. And she was so amazing.
Whoever said a good man was hard to find, positively, absolutely, sure was blind. I found the best that ever was, is just some of the things he does. He shakes my ashes, greases my griddle, churns my butter, strokes my fiddle. My man is such a handy man.
So Rick just found her in, singing in North Carolina in a church,
Wow. Wonderful.
That episode was shot in North Carolina, I think. So you weren't able to go to that one, even though it wasn't
I remember sitting in the editing room with George when they were putting in the L, the above ground train in Chicago, with all of his editing magic. And they did all that stuff.
I did want to ask too, you mentioned a few times your involvement with the post-production process, but what was kind of the norm for the writers at that point in terms of post-production on the episode? Was it just kind of a, hey, come check this out? Or did you have a larger role in giving notes and kind of...
No, just come check it out. And, and I love editing. I love to watch it. I love to, it's the final story.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the editor was there and if we weren't in with George, and if George said it was okay, I could just kind of peek my head in and sit for a while on our breaks. So, yeah, great experience. Have you actually talked to George too?
Everybody has. We wish. Right?
We I don't know. We're gonna try to track him down, but he's a hard guy to get in touch with.
My dream interview is George Lucas, but I don't want to talk to him until I've talked to everyone else.
Fair.
Because I don't want to go in and just not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it's
well, he's in LA a lot now, right? Because of the
museum, yeah. But I feel like we have a better chance with this podcast than if we were doing like a Star Wars something or whatever, where it's just like, he's talked about that, ad nauseum so much. But I think maybe Young Indy could be interested in doing that. But that'll just be it's a hard get.
Well, and either way, we get so many good stories about George in this podcast that I've never heard, and I'm a fan of this stuff. And if anything, I hope this is a great record of some of the things that George has done that people don't know about and that people are unaware about, and they're not hearing on documentaries and television news bites and stuff like that. And the picture of this man, if we get a picture of anything from these interviews very clearly, it's this man and his work and his voice. He's the author of this show. I think the more we talk to people, the more we realize that he had the vision for this show, and he hired you and he hired all these people because he thought these people get what I'm trying to do, and it's going to be a beautiful thing with all of their help. And it's just a beautiful, clear picture.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy to be in Maine now, just writing novels. So, but it was good to kind of go back and visit Young Indy again.
Yeah, I mean, you've been very generous with your time here, and we don't want to keep you too long. But what are you working on right now? Like, what's keeping you busy?
I moved to Maine 5 years ago, about 4.5 years ago, when I was teaching in Florence. I was teaching in Florence, and I was out of Hollywood, and I was kind of burned out. And I said, my goal when I was a kid is to write novels. And then I got sidetracked into plays and movies and TV, and which I had a great time. But I thought, okay, now it's time for me to be able to just kind of control a little bit more, stop taking notes, stop having so many fingers in the pie. And so I was sitting at a cafe in Florence, and I actually had written a movie called Princess Bob's that Tom Cruise's company had optioned, and then they dropped the option. So I said, okay, it's mine now, and I'll make this into a novel. And I sat at my little cafe, and I was like, I'm so bored. I already know the story. I already know the characters. I don't want to just transcribe into a novel kind of format. So I said, okay, where am I now? How am I feeling now? What am I doing now? And I went, okay, you're in Florence. You're kind of changing. You want to change your life, all this kind of stuff. So I wrote a book called Find Me in Florence, which is kind of historical, but a romance and a lot about just Florence. And so I got a call from a friend of mine that I'd worked on a different TV show, and he said, hey, I just got hired because someone is this very, very wealthy man who grew up on Staten Island. Is this interesting? Do you want to hear this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Please continue.
This guy in Staten Island who had come over from Italy when he was a little boy. World War II, he wasn't popular because he was Italian, and now he's a billionaire in LA, and he wants to leave something. So he wants to hire writers to write books about famous Italians who have contributed to America or just contributed to the world. So he said, do you want to write one? And they were, paying me like a nice sum of money. And I said, yeah. He goes, I hear you're in Florence. I hear you're in Italy. And I hear you're writing novels. I go, yeah. So I wrote Dreams of Discovery, which is about John Cabot, who was kind of why we speak English today, because Columbus went south, John Cabot went north and put the flag all the way down the coast. And he was sailing under the English flag. And then I did one about a fabulous woman named Laura Bassi, who was a first experimental physicist ever. So I wrote those, and then I came to Maine, and I started this mystery series, because I've always wanted to do mystery crime. So I'm on my fourth book. The first one is 10 Days, a D-Rama mystery. Second one is 9 Days. 8 Days just came out about a month ago, and now I'm working on 7 Days. So I'm going to go all the way down to 1.
Wow.
And so that's what I'm working on now.
That's fun. Awesome. It's funny how you have Florence, you have mystery, like your Young Indy work is clearly continued into other parts of your life. Yeah. It's great.
Because when I was a professor, my dissertation was on film genre, storytelling genre. So you can tell that I don't tell me I can't write in this genre, that genre.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like you had a very eclectic and wonderful life. I mean, you were, doing like stage combat training, and then over to, writing romances in Florence.
Again, the group of people that he put together for this show, it's like if you could go on an adventure with the writers of Young Indy, you would have a great old time.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, if fans want to learn more about what you're up to, do you have a website or a social media presence?
Yeah, it's just Jule Selbo. I just wrote down these things that I thought you might ask about, and I want to see if I...
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, did it all. Okay. I think we touched on everything.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. And you said juleselbo.com, or is it? Yeah. Okay, great. juleselbo.com. Well, thanks very much for being here. We hope we can have you back on the show sometime.
This is great. Thank you, guys.
Listeners out there, if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Instagram at Young Indy Pod. And till next time, for Daniel and myself, thanks very much for being here, and keep on adventuring.
Next time on the Young Indy Chroniclers.
We're thrilled to have René Mansour, a French filmmaker, directed 2 episodes of Young Indy.
In France, doing a commercial movie was bad. I wrote and directed another film called Dial Code Santa Claus. That film was ripped off by John Hughes. The film was Home Alone. Steven Spielberg watched it and loved it. When George Lucas was looking for directors, Steven Spielberg said, wow, I have a guy. He hired movie directors. He wanted to have the scope. It was like little movies.